In the UK, October is Black History Month, and this month we celebrate the achievements of African and Caribbean figures in the history of the United Kingdom. And Colin and I are going to look at the Premier League, and we're going to celebrate the best of Africa's contribution to the top flight. And we are going to try and decide who is the greatest African player to play in the Premier League. Now, Colin, let's sort out a little bit of criteria before we get down to this debate. So we are focusing only on players who are eligible for African countries. So there is no place for N'Golo Kante, no place for Patrick Vieira, no place for Thierry Henry. And also we are evaluating players based on their contribution to English football. So I think this probably rules out the likes of Samuel Eto'o or George Weah, perhaps, who played in England but achieved their greatest successes elsewhere. So let's start us off. Give us some of the names you've been toying around for this one.
Yeah, Ed, certainly not you, but just looking at it. So I've got who I think would be my number one greatest ever African player in the Premier League or in English football. But at the same time, I think I have a few that I think might be worth the mention, and I'll just put them out there. First of all, there's John Mikel Obi. A lot of people look at him and think, hey, hang on, why is he there in that list? But you've got to think about it. In about 10 plus years that he spent at Chelsea, he won 2 Premier League titles, won 3 FA Cups, won the Champions League, won the Europa League, and was not just a bit part player. He was a key part of the teams that won all of those titles with Chelsea. And then you've got to look at someone like Michael Essien. You know, the same thing with Chelsea. He won the Premier League twice. He won the FA Cup 4 times. He won the Champions League. So that puts him straight there into the argument. Someone like Lucas Radebe, you know, I would put him there also, even though he didn't win as much as these other gentlemen, but he was a phenomenal figure for Leeds United, and he did it in such a way that he's still remembered as a legend for Leeds up until this day. And then, of course, I'd also toss in someone like Nwankwo Kanu, who was part of Arsenal's Invincibles, won the Premier League title with them, won the FA Cup with them, and not just that, also won the FA Cup with a Pompey team that nobody would have thought could win that title. And just on the other end of the scale, he also was with West Brom and, you know, phenomenally helped them survive relegation even when they were bottom at Christmas. So I think just those for me would be the ones I'd put in the mix. What about you, Ed?
I'm absolutely stunned. I almost fell off my chair that you didn't mention JJ Okocha, aka the Nigerian Said Benrahma. I'm absolutely stunned. I mean, in terms of pure quality, in terms of entertainment, in terms of technique, in terms of getting a crowd on their feet, how on earth is Okocha not making your shortlist?
Well, look, you talked about the criteria for us, you know, getting this player. Now, apart from, you know, the players who did not get the majority of their best years in the Premier League, I think JJ's best years were when he was at Besiktas, when he was at Fenerbahce, when he was in the Bundesliga, and also a little bit of his time at Paris Saint-Germain. Now, when he came to the Premier League, he did entertain, and he was, you know, a crowd pleaser, but he didn't win that much with Bolton Wanderers. And to be fair, if you put him side by side with Radebe in terms of the achievement with English clubs, I think you'd have to go with Radebe. So as much as I love JJ and as much as I can get biased about Nigerians, I don't think I'd put JJ in the top 5 greatest African players in the Premier League.
Of those players you did shortlist, I think the one who stands out for me is really Essien. There were lots of criticisms when he first arrived in English football from Lyon for his somewhat over-enthusiastic tackling, his desire to kind of go off his feet. But actually, as the years went on, we saw a complete box-to-box midfielder, a player capable of passing, of shooting with both feet, of tackling crisply, the intelligence to fit in alongside the likes of Frank Lampard and Michael Ballack in that midfield, and also the versatility to play at right back on occasion. But the great tragedy, of course, with Essien is injuries. And there were long delays, long absences. We waited and we waited for him to come back. And after those first injuries, I think we only really saw glimpses of what he could become. And it was a real shame that when Chelsea did win the Champions League in 2012, that Essien was an unused substitute on that day, a player whose natural abilities surely deserved so much more. Another player I want to throw in there, a more recent addition to this pantheon, is Sadio Mane. Still got some great years ahead of them. We hope that they're going to come at Liverpool. But I think what we've seen from him, both in the Champions League and in the Premier League, has been enough to ensure that he deserves a place in this conversation. Do you agree that he's a contender for the top 5, or would you already stick him in there?
Oh yeah, certainly. I think he is a contender, but I do believe he has to do more. Look, helping Liverpool along with Mohamed Salah to the Premier League title is something that was a bit of a holy grail to Liverpool fans, and they accomplished it. So yeah, I do think that Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah deserve a shout to be in there in that pantheon.
But also in 3 seasons at Liverpool, the last 3 seasons, he's reached 1 Champions League final, he's won another one, and he's won the Premier League. And we really saw, particularly in that second season, some of the big performances, particularly against Bayern Munich, memorably in that quarter-final. We really saw a player, in my opinion, who has done as much in terms of individual performances in the big games as any other African player to play in English football.
Oh yeah, certainly. And I mean, like you said, I'd just like to see a little bit more, a couple more years. And I do believe that, he can get himself into the conversation for top 2, top 3, not just top 5.
Okay, so now it boils down to number 1, and my pick is going to be Yaya Toure, Manchester City legend Yaya Toure. He won 2 Premier League titles at the Etihad Stadium. He was, of course, the key figure in their FA Cup final success in 2011, having already scored the winner against Manchester United in the semi-final, then the winner against Stoke. And this was really the match that set City on their way to being the super club they are today. I think as an all-round midfield talent, a goal threat from midfield, there was no one better. I think just look at the way, particularly in those early years at City, the way he would dominate opposition midfields. I remember one game against United when he had both Paul Scholes and Michael Carrick in his pocket. And I think in terms of what we saw from Toure in the Premier League, there is no African player who can match him.
Okay, I hope you say that with your tongue firmly ensconced in your cheek, because when you look at that, you've got to think that my number 1 player outtops, outbeats, outdoes everything that Yaya Toure does. And I'm talking about the legend of Didier Drogba. Look, he was a late starter. He came into the Premier League and instantly he changed. In fact, I would go so far as to say that, without Drogba, Mourinho and Chelsea don't win, all of the silverware that they did in that time. He was voted Chelsea's greatest ever player. He was the 4th highest goal scorer ever for Chelsea. He won 4 Premier League titles, 4 FA Cups from the Champions League. But beyond that, you've got to look at Didier Drogba and think about all the decisive goals that he scored for Chelsea. When Chelsea needed, 1 goal to settle a game, Drogba was there. The FA Cup, they needed a goal to win it. He was always there. Drogba was a game changer at every point in time for Chelsea. And I doubt there's going to be a finer specimen, of African football achievement and accomplishment than Didier Drogba in the Premier League. So, being your Yaya Toure, Didier Drogba is the man.
I certainly think when it comes to big game performances, when it comes to, like you say, those decisive matches, that actually Drogba, in an African context, maybe apart from Eto'o, you could say he's pretty unparalleled. But actually, in terms of the consistency, I sometimes wonder whether the myth outweighs the man a little bit as far as Drogba at Chelsea. I mean, of his 9 seasons in English football, there were only 2 seasons where he scored more than 12 goals. There were a lot of seasons where he weighed in with contributions of 6 goals, 7 goals, 9 goals. And I just, as a spearhead of that Chelsea team, I think a lot more would have been expected from him. Whereas Toure, one of only 2 players, along with Frank Lampard, to score 20 or more goals from central midfield in the Premier League, I feel you're not giving him as much credit as he deserves for this. Also in 2014, when Luis Suarez won the Player of the Year award, I really think a lot of people would have argued that actually Toure deserved it in that season when he inspired City to the title. But also he was a builder. He was a pioneer. He was a man who played a key role in transforming City. And I think for this, you really do need to give him a little bit more credit.
How do you say that about Toure and not say it about Drogba? Chelsea were essentially, just there or thereabouts contenders when Mourinho came in and brought Drogba with him. But with Drogba, I mean, they went from being a millionaire team trying to sort of, hang with the big boys to being essentially, champions. And that's what Drogba did for them. You can look at all of the other players that were there. Look, let's look at this carefully. Chelsea was a team that had the likes of Lampard, who could win with goals. They had goals all over the pitch. But Drogba was the man that you knew could do it. At any time when you needed him, he was always deliver. How do you argue the 104 goals in just over 250 appearances? Ed, come on, man.
I think as Yaya Toure would gladly take second place to Drogba, I think in this instance, I will gladly take second place to you. And I will agree that we'll give number one spot to Drogba, but coming up just behind him on his heels, Yaya Toure.
Now we're talking.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.